I didn't realize how quiet betrayal could be until I heard it breathing through the walls. I'm 36. A woman who once believed that love, patience, and a well-cooked meal could soften any sharp edge in a home. My name is Naomi Quyan. I design garden courtyards for a living, the kind of spaces where light falls kindly and wind sounds like forgiveness. And for years I tried to plant that same softness into the house I shared with my husband, Adrian, and his family. I grew up the daughter of a seamstress and a night shift janitor. I learned early that survival was just choreography step around the broken tile. Shoulder, open the heavy door. Stitch what frays before it unravels. That choreography had kept me safe for so long that I mistook it for security. I mistook my carefulness for power. The first crack in my certainty came on a humid evening in June, when the jasmine along the fence had finally decided to bloom. The kitchen smelled like a promise fish sauce caramelized with ginger. Rice steaming. Scallions waking up in oil. Adrian's mother, Huang, snipped cilantro with the small gold-handled scissors she guarded more fiercely than her jewelry. Add more sugar, she told me without looking, as if we were a single body with 4 hands. Her voice had the soft patina she wore in front of guests and outsiders. All concern and busy kindness. In private, there was an acidity under it, like fruit picked too early. Not too much, I murmured, stirring Grandma's blood sugar. My mother raised 7 children before there were labels for these things, Huang said, a laugh tucked like a blade inside the words. She knows how to eat. I was not one of those 7. That never needed to be said. It existed in the way I was loved performatively, conditionally, like a guest who had overstayed but kept offering to wash the dishes. Grandma Min was 78 and moved on careful feet, as if each step was a negotiation between gravity and dignity. She and I shared a language beyond words, a patience of women who had pressed their palms flat against too many days to count. She called me Kandao with a tenderness that dented my chest. Daughter-in-law. But sometimes the way she watched me from the veranda made me feel she was watching herself in a mirror from 50 years ago. Naomi. Adrian called from the living room. My sister and Tessa are on the way. Can you make the lotus tea strong? We need to keep everyone awake. Awake for what? I wanted to ask, but I kept my voice warm. I'll brew it. Phoebe, his sister, arrived with a laugh that belonged to an expensive restaurant. Tessa, their cousin, followed, clicking her nails against her phone. They were both dressed in the city's version of casual linen that whispered money and sandals too delicate for sidewalks. I carried out the tea tray. Adrian's hand brushed my back as I set it down. A touch that used to reassure me. Now it felt like punctuation, a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't spoken. We'll make it quick, Phoebe said, balancing a smile on her face as if it were a heavy crown. Grandma, the board at the foundation needs a decision about the land in Bayview. If we move now, we can leverage the tax break and put the orchard in a trust. It's smart planning. The orchard is not mine to sell, Grandma said gently, just mine to watch over. It's not selling, Tessa added, her ponytail swinging like a metronome. We're protecting it. With the trust, we can manage it together. You know, as a family. And Naomi can help with the garden plans when we expand the public path. She threw me a smile that tasted like ash. She had never once asked me about my work, beyond whether I could pretty up a patio. Grandma's fingers traced the rim of her teacup. Your grandfather planted those trees for your father when he was born, she said to Adrian, not looking at anyone else. He said the roots should hold the family when storms came. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And they will. Ma noi. But we need to do this in a way that keeps the taxes from eating the whole thing. Naomi, tell them. You know how these things work. I do know, but what I know about roots is that they obey the shape of the vessel they grew up in. If you press them long enough against a wall, they learn to grow sideways. I smiled mechanically and explained. as simply as I could. The difference between irrevocable and revocable trusts, how beneficiary designations worked, and what happened when guardianship was invoked. It was a language I never wanted to learn in my own marriage. But marriage teaches you the architecture of a house by the rooms you are kept from. See, Phoebe chirped. We're all aligned. Grandma lifted her eyes to me. Something inside them moved. Like a fish breaking the surface of a lake at dusk. Come to my room later, she said. More breath than sound. Dinner pressed forward with the heavy cheer of a parade. Somewhere between the second helping of caramelized pork and the third retelling of a story about Adrian's high school debate trophy. My phone vibrated against my thigh. I shouldn't have looked. I did. A photograph illuminated the screen, a blurry shot taken from a distance of me at a corner table in a cafe. Leaning forward. A man's hand halfway visible at the edge of the frame. The subject line from an unknown email address read, "Does your husband know I swallowed a shard of air?" The photo was from last Thursday. The man was a client, a landscape architect I'd met to discuss water features for a municipal project. The framing made it look well. It made it look like something to be used. Not a moment to be understood. The room was suddenly too bright. Conversation continued without me. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, pressing my fingertips against the cool tile. The second email landed as if the sender were standing outside with a clock. We have more. 3 more photos came through. Each carefully chosen to be incriminating without being honest. My chest tightened, not from guilt but from the premonition of being accused. Shame is one thing. Being cast as a villain inside a story you did not write is another. When I came back out, Grandma was not at the table. I found her in her small room at the back of the house, where she kept her lacquer jewelry box and the portrait of her as a young bride. A photograph, she said, she kept not to remember her beauty, but to remember her eagerness. She was sitting in the light from the small window, turning her wedding ring around her finger. "You called me," I said softly, closing the door behind me. She nodded toward the bed. A thin envelope lay on the quilt, yellowed at the edges and tied with red thread. "Your mother brought this to me when you and Adrian married," she said. "She asked me to keep it until the right time. When is right time, old women don't know until it sits in the bones." She tapped her chest. "Now. It sits here, heavy." I sat. The paper smelled faintly of soap, and the kind of dust that lives in closets with secrets. Inside were 4 items a birth certificate I had never seen. A photograph of my mother, with a man whose eyes tilted exactly the way mine do. A note in my mother's hand that said simply, "He cannot protect you. But I can." And a copy of a deed. Not to the orchard. To a strip of land that ran like a spine behind the Bayview lots. A sliver of access road that, if I traced the map correctly, was the only legal path for equipment to enter the orchard from the south. The deed had my mother's name and, beneath it in a neat recent notation, "Mina," added after our wedding with Grandma as witness. My throat burned. Why didn't she tell me? "Because she did not want your marriage to be a negotiation," Grandma said. "She wanted it to be a home." A home. The word trembled. I thought of the photos on my phone and how a narrative could be built around a few well-chosen images. I thought of Adrian's polite, insistent way of directing our life like traffic, of Phoebe's efficient kindness, of Tessa's nails clicking as if she were counting the seconds to something profitable. I thought of the orchard, those heavy-limbed trees that had witnessed more vows than any church we could afford. Something old, something fierce, woke up in me and sat fully upright. "Who knows about this deed?" I asked. "Your mother and me," Grandma said, "and the clerk who stamped it at the county office. He is very old and yells when people cut line. So I think he is safe." I exhaled, laughed, then covered my mouth with both hands because it felt wrong to laugh in the middle of a revelation that unstitched my life and resewed it in a new pattern. "Grandma," I said, "they're going to try to move without us. They're going to say we're confused. Or we're selfish. Or we don't understand the modern world. They will say the words they practice in front of mirrors, she said, and a small smile broke her solemnity. But, Kondau, I know the orchard. It does not respond to mirrors. It responds to weather. When we rejoined the table, I was a different version of myself but wore the old version's face. I laughed when it was polite to. I took seconds. I asked Tessa about her apartment renovation. She glanced at Phoebe like they shared a private joke before telling me she was doing something minimal but dramatic, which is a form of woman used by certain designers and certain men when they do not know how to describe what they want. Later, after the dishes, Adrian came to find me on the porch where the jasmine made the air almost drinkable. You disappeared, he said, sliding his hands into his pockets the way he did when he wanted to look harmless. Your grandma needed me, I said. He nodded, looking out into the yard. Phoebe thinks we should move fast, he said. Lawyers by Friday. Mama's nervous about taxes. It's all, you know, strategy. You get it. I get it, I said, and thought, you do not yet understand that I get it. I told them you're on board, he added, turning his eyes on me like flashlights. We're a team. Right. I heard the invitation I was supposed to accept. I heard the trapdoor opening under it. I rested my fingers on the porch railing. Felt the paint flake beneath my nails. We'll do what's right for the family, I said. It sounded loyal. It was truthful. It also included me in a category they often curated to exclude me from. He kissed my temple, his mouth cool from beer. That's my girl. We had once loved each other in a language that required no translation. That love still existed. I think, like a guest room that no one slept in anymore, but kept clean out of habit. That night, in our bed, he fell asleep immediately, his breath evening out into the soft huff I had once found endearing and now found invasive. As if he were breathing on my thoughts, I lay awake, the envelope tucked under my side of the mattress, my mother's handwriting glowing in the dark behind my eyelids. He cannot protect you, but I can. How do you forgive the dead for telling you the truth too late? How do you thank them for the same thing? By morning, the emailer had escalated. We know where you were Monday night. The subject line read, a photo attached another cafe. Another angle that suggested intimacy where there had been none. I studied it the way I study soil. What's present? What's misdirection? What's missing? Missing the notebook open to irrigation calculations, the municipal planner's badge, the fact that I always sit with my back to the wall, an old habit from city buses and too many late-night trains. I replied to the email with a single sentence, thank you for the timestamp. Then I opened my camera roll and scrolled back to Monday to the picture I took of my client's mock-up, which included the cafe's table number reflected in the window. I was not planning a counterattack. I was planting facts in the ground so that when wind came, they would not tip over. At noon, Phoebe texted, brunch at Tessa's family meeting. It's time. It's time. In families like this, time is not a flow. It's a decision handed down like a dress. I typed back, I'll be there. Then I called my mother's oldest friend, Auntie Lan, who had once taught me how to cut a pattern without wasting fabric. I need to ask about something, I said, and I want you to tell me if it makes me a bad person. She laughed her old, beautiful laugh that sounded like bamboo wind chimes. Bad people do not ask this question. Come. By the time I left her kitchen, my hair smelled like fried shallots and courage. She had told me what I suspected but needed blessed, that you can love a person and still refuse the script they hand you. That you can protect a thing not because it is valuable to the market, but because it is sacred to your history. That the most dangerous kind of thief is the one who calls themselves family while reaching for your pockets. At Tessa's, the floors were pale, and the walls a white that made every flaw in a person's skin look like a choice. The table held avocado toast with seeds that looked like punctuation scattered by a bored poet, We're going to keep this simple, Phoebe began, sliding a packet toward each of us. Grandma, Mama, Adrian, Naomi, paper clipped to paper and neat. Hopeful stacks. We'll establish a family trust with me and Adrian as co-trustees for the Orchard and Bayview lots, with Mama as advisor. Naomi, you'll be listed as supportive party. That way everyone's protected. Supportive party, I repeated, like a tourist trying out a word in a language I'd never meet again. What does that mean? Exactly. It means you'll sign, Tessa said, charming as a chandelier, and we'll do the heavy legal lifting. I looked at Adrian. He did not look back. He studied his copy like it was a book in a language he suddenly couldn't read. In that moment, under the cold benevolence of Tessa's lighting, I understood something about my marriage I had been avoiding. He didn't need to conspire, he only needed to go along. There are men who break your heart with their cruelty, and men who break it with their compliance. I placed my hands flat on the papers. Before we begin, I said, softly enough that they had to lean in to hear me, I have something to share. Phoebe's pen hovered like a sword waiting for gravity's permission to strike paper. I'll start the signing, she said. Before she could, I slid the envelope, now neatly retied with its red thread, onto the table between us. The string left a faint line of dust on the oak. The silence it created was heavier than argument. What's that? Tessa asked, already suspicious. A small piece of truth, I said, the kind you overlook when you're too busy calling something a strategy. I opened the envelope slowly. The way one lifts the lid on something that hums faintly. The deed slipped out. The ink soft from age. The official seal still glinting under the recessed light. This, I said, is the access road to the Bayview Orchard. It's the only legal entrance for any machinery or transport. Without it, no trucks, no development, no construction, no expansion. My mother owned it, and now, so do I. Tessa's smile faltered. That's impossible. All that land was under Grandpa's trust. Except the road, I said, tapping the paper. When the county rezoned in 1983, they separated it. My mother bought it before I was born. I suppose she didn't think that would matter until now. Adrian's face tightened. He recognized the shift before anyone else did. He knew me enough to sense when my calm was architecture, not mercy. So, I continued, before we make decisions for the family, I'd like to understand what exactly you plan to do with land that isn't yours to reach. Huang's teacup clinked softly against the saucer. She didn't speak. Her eyes moved between me and her children, like someone watching a bridge slowly catch fire from both ends. Phoebe blinked, recovering her composure. We're not enemies here. Naomi, surely your mother wouldn't want family fighting over technicalities. Technicalities, I repeated. That's what you call a boundary when you want to cross it. Adrian finally spoke. Naomi, can we talk alone? I wanted to refuse, but Grandma's frail hand touched my wrist, a small, anchoring weight. I nodded. He led me to the balcony where the city shimmered like something beautiful you could no longer touch without burning yourself. He closed the door behind us. Why didn't you tell me about that deed? Why didn't you tell me your sister hired a photographer to follow me? His head snapped back. The faint color drained from his face. What are you talking about? I handed him my phone, the emails, the photos, the timestamps. He scrolled, eyes widening. Naomi, I swear. You don't have to swear, I said quietly. Just don't insult me by pretending you didn't know. She wanted leverage before the trust signing. Someone thought that if I looked compromised, I'd sign anything to stay respectable. He exhaled shakily, leaning on the railing. Phoebe can be ambitious. Ambitious, I said, my tone slicing the word in half. That's what you call betrayal when it comes from your own blood. He covered his face with both hands. I didn't plan this. No, I said. You just let it happen near you. For a long moment, the only sound was the city breathing cars whispering, wind catching loose bits of conversation from the street. He finally lowered his hands. So what happens now? Now, I said, we let them sign whatever they like, and then we remind them that every orchard needs a road. When we went back inside, Grandma was telling a story about how her husband once planted mango trees too close together, and how they grew fighting for sunlight until one finally strangled the other's roots. Her eyes flicked to mine. A secret glint. She understood more than anyone realized. Phoebe straightened, back in command mode. Well, she said briskly, since everyone's aware of the details, we can move forward. Naomi. Of course you'll still sign. This doesn't change the structure. It just means we'll include a clause about access. I smiled faintly. Of course, but I'll have my lawyer draft that clause. Her mouth twitched. Your lawyer? Yes, I said. The same one who handled my mother's estate. He's very thorough. The meeting collapsed into polite confusion. Words like reasonable and clarify and adjustment floated like dying fish on the surface of a poisoned pond. Adrian stared at his lap. Huang rose and busied herself, refilling cups no one wanted. When the papers were finally packed away, Grandma leaned on my arm as we walked out. You remind me of my sister, she whispered. She once sewed a wedding dress with secret pockets inside for train tickets. Women like us always leave ourselves an exit. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too crowded with unspoken things. I sat at the window watching the lights blink along the river. My mother's note lay open on my desk. He cannot protect you. But I can. The he in the note had once been my father. A man I'd never met but knew had chosen silence over chaos. I wondered if that was how Adrian would remember himself one day, as someone who chose stillness instead of courage. The following week unfolded like a slow knife. Phoebe's tone in group messages shifted from honeyed to clipped. Need your lawyer's contact, she texted once, to which I replied. He'll reach out after the revisions. Adrian oscillated between apology and justification. Huang sent me containers of soup I didn't eat but couldn't throw away. Then came the call from Grandma's caretaker she'd fallen. Not badly, but enough to worry. I left my desk mid-afternoon and drove straight there. In her room, she was propped up by pillows. Her hands folded over the quilt embroidered with cranes she'd sewn decades ago. You came, she said, smiling faintly. I always will. She looked at me a long time. They are afraid now. I can hear it in how they speak. Fear makes noise. But, Naomi, don't let revenge make noise too. Let it breathe quietly, like soil after rain. I promised her I would. 3 days later, Adrian came home late, smelling of whiskey and regret. They're saying you're going to block the trust, he said, dropping onto the couch. I'm not blocking anything. I'm protecting it. Same thing to them. Then maybe they should learn the difference. He rubbed his temples. They think you're out for payback. I turned toward him. I'm out for peace. If that looks like payback from where they're standing, that's not my fault. He looked at me as though seeing someone he couldn't categorize anymore. You've changed. I've grown, I said. They're not the same thing. The next morning, I received a message from an unknown number, a screenshot of a fake affair rumor posted in a local social group. The caption, she seduced her client for land rights. Beneath it, dozens of comments bloomed like mold. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, then laughed a dry, disbelieving sound. They were faster than I expected. I forwarded the post to my lawyer with one line, add defamation to the list. That afternoon, I visited Grandma again. She was asleep, breathing shallowly. The doctor said she'd simply grown tired. I sat beside her, holding her cool hand. telling her softly that the trees in the orchard were still bearing fruit. That night, she passed away quietly. The way she had lived without spectacle, without asking permission. Her funeral was small, as she wanted. The family wore white. But their grief had the rehearsed precision of actors who hadn't studied the script. Phoebe gave a eulogy full of beautiful emptiness. Adrian held my hand loosely, like a duty. After the guests left, I stayed behind to help the monks pack away incense holders. Under Grandma's pillow, I found an envelope with my name in her shaky script. Inside was a single sentence: use the soil well. The next morning, before the lawyer's meeting with the family, I went to the orchard. The air was thick with late summer sweetness, bees moving lazily through the light. I placed Grandma's note under the oldest tree and whispered, "I will." At the meeting, Phoebe arrived armed with 2 attorneys and a folder that looked like a threat disguised as stationery. Adrian sat beside me but slightly angled toward her. The distance between us was visible. Her lawyer began with politeness. Our client proposes an amendment acknowledging Mrs. Wynn's claim to the access road in exchange for full cooperation in the trust formation. We believe this is fair. I nodded. I agree. On one condition. Everyone froze. The trust must remain irrevocable. And all decisions about sale or redevelopment require unanimous consent of every title holder. That includes me. Phoebe's lawyer frowned. That effectively gives you veto power. Yes, I said. It does. The air shifted. Adrian opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. Huang exhaled, as if something inside her finally collapsed into relief. After a tense pause, Phoebe's lawyer whispered something to her. She leaned back, assessing me. You really planned this? No, I said softly. You did. I just paid attention. They signed, and when it was done, I thanked them for their cooperation and left before anyone could reclaim the last word. That evening, I walked through the orchard alone. The setting sun spilled gold through the branches. I thought of Grandma's voice. Use the soil well. I didn't know yet what I would build. Only that it would belong to women like her. Like my mother. Like me, quiet architects of endurance. I started the paperwork the next week to convert the land into a cultural garden, open to widows and women starting over. Adrian didn't try to stop me. When he moved out a month later, he left a note that read, "I hope you find peace." I did not reply. Months passed. The orchard bloomed. I hired local women to help with planting. Phoebe never came back. Though her firm sent annual inquiries about potential collaboration, I filed them unread. Sometimes at dusk, I sit under the oldest tree with a cup of tea and listen to the wind threading through leaves like a whisper that has outlived its grief. The road my mother bought remains narrow, but it is mine, an inheritance of defiance. What I learned from them all, Adrian, Phoebe, even Huang, is that silence is not weakness when it has purpose. It is simply the sound of roots working beneath the surface. If you've ever been underestimated, I hope my story reminds you patience is not surrender. It's strategy in disguise. If you felt something in this story, share it. Like, comment, subscribe, and tell me if you've ever had to rebuild your peace from the ashes of betrayal. I'd love to hear your story too.